RoboPapa.
Hey guys, Papa here, and today's episode 3 for Learning C Sharp. And in today's episode, we're going to learn about comments and the type of loops and how to write our first function. In case you missed the previous episode, episode number 2, where we looked on primitives and if statements and switches, please click over here and it will take you to that episode. That way you can catch up. So with no overdue, we got a lot to cover. Let's get started. Okay, here we are in the solution that we finished from last episode. And if you missed it, I'll put a link in the description, but also like over here, that way you can click on it. And I just wanted to add on top of that episode something about the if statement and the condition within them. So the if statement and the condition it will only qualify if it's true. So over here, when score is greater or equal to 90, which if it's true, then it will go and set the letter score to A. The condition within the if statement can be with any logic operators. So for example, I can say if score is greater and equal to 90, and then I can say or, which in C# this is how you represent logic or. Can say score is less than or equal to 100. So then it will say if my score is greater or equal to 90, I will go in. But if it's not, I'll check this one as well. If I want to say and, it's just the two %. So that means that the score has to be greater or equal to 90 and it has to be less or equal to 100. There's also the not, which is, if we'll surround this with parentheses, I can say not, which is basically the exclamation mark. And then it will take whatever qualifications I have within the parentheses over here, and it will revert the result. So if this was true, the not of it will be false. If it was false, the not of it will be true. And I can do complicated logic by like operators over here. But I just want to recap on this, that with the logic operators, we have not, or, and that's basically like what you really need to represent the logic itself. All right, so let's go into our today's episode, and we'll start with comments, which is a good transition over here. There are 3 different comments type. One of them is a single liner, and the way you do it is with just / and then it will allow you to do comments. And what does that mean is the compiler is going to ignore it. So I can put gibberish over here just like this, and the compiler will say, well, I can ignore that, I don't need to compile it. If I'll remove the comment, now it will say, okay, I don't understand what you're actually trying to do over here, and it's not going to compile. So a single liner is just one like that, and you can do multiple line with single line. So I can say this one is line number 1, line number 2, etc. But if I want to not write the / every single time, I can go to the second type of the comments, which is multi-line, which all you do is /*, and then to close it, you do */. And then everything within it will be a comment. So line number 1, line number 2, and with the Visual Studio, every time you'll go into a new line, it will try to add that asterisk. That way it's like really well formatted and nicely, as you can see over here. So that's a multi-line. The third type is the remark and the explanation on different methods or classes. And the way you do that is above a method, which main is a function or a method, or a class, which this is my class, you can come and do 3 backslashes or slashes, and then Visual Studio actually will complete the snippet for you. And then you can put over here the summary, which you can say this is my main function, and you can give it like what is args. It's an array of command line input params, for example. So if I'll try now to actually see what's main is, I'll be able to see this information. And I'll show you more about it as we go into the methods. So that's comments with the C#. Now if we'll go on the loop, and all the loop does is running the same code within the loop body multiple times depending on how you actually set it up. So let's say, for example, if we'll put this code as a comment, that way we can ignore it. So control, if you mark lines of code and you do Control KC with Visual Studio, it will automatically mark those as comments. And it's a nice shortcut that you can use. So let's say, like I said, let's say we have the need to output hello world 5 times to the screen. One way to do it, as we already learned, is you can do console write line hello world, and then we can copy that 5 times. Right? That will output 5 lines of hello world. So if we run it, we can see hello world over here 5 times. But what if I wanted suddenly to change the requirements to say I want you to print 1,000 hello worlds? Well, now you cannot, it's not feasible to copy paste 1,000 times, because then I can change it to 1,000,000 or something very big that your hand will get tired if you do that. So that's where for loops actually, or loops, getting into play. So there's 4 types actually of looping. One of them is, as I already mentioned, it's a for loop, and the syntax for it will be for, and then you will have certain like initialization of the index, and you don't have to do that, but usually that's the standard. Then you're having a condition over here on the index that will tell the for loop when it wants to stop. And the condition over here is the same condition that you will find on the if statement. So still you can do this kind of logic to qualify for the condition. And then you want to increase or decrease the index. That way you can actually meet the condition. And then you will have your loop body over here. So that's one, that's the for loop. The next one is a while loop. And a while loop doesn't have the index initialization or the increasing or decreasing of the index. All it has is the condition. And then it has the body, which means that within the body, you are responsible to make sure you're increasing or decreasing your condition, the index, that way you can meet your condition. If the condition will never meet, it's what it's called an infinite loop, which means it will always run. And it could be that that's your behavior that you want, but you need to be very careful. So usually you want to have a condition, that way the loop will know how to stop. The third type of loop is a do while. And a do while is basically going on a do, and then within the do you have the loop body, and then in the end of the parentheses you do while condition. So one thing to notice, this for loop, the for loop and the while loop are can run 0 to the condition, which means that if your condition is automatically failing, it will not run at a single time. So for example, if we say int index equal to 10, and the condition is where index is less than 10, well, you will not meet that condition because 10 is already greater than 10, and therefore that body will never run. The do while, you guarantee that the do will run at least once. even if the condition then doesn't meet, because it will run the do and then it will check the condition on the while. So that's something also to note about, that the do while will run at least once. The last the fourth and last loop is an iterator loop, and the way it is, it's a for each, and then you have an object in a list or something that you can iterate on, and then you have the body over here. You don't need to worry about a condition or an index because the iterator will take care of it. So while those three loops, the for loop, the while loop, and the do while, you might have an overflow, especially if you're looking on an array, because your index might get bigger than the array size. The for each can guarantee you that you will not have an overflow of the array size because it's iterating on it. And it will stop when it gets to the last iteration. So let's take again the example over here. Let's say we want to print the hello world 10 times at this time. So let's keep one line of hello world, and we will write it with each loop. And the loop itself, the for each, I'll not iterate on this because it's not an iterator, it's just a list. So I will actually show you the example of the for, the while, and the do while. So for the for loop, we'll do for int index equal to 0. So we'll start from 0, and we'll say as long as index is less than 5, we'll do plus plus index. You can do either plus plus index or you can do index plus plus. Really, it's the same. I just prefer to do the plus plus index. And then we'll open and close the curly braces, and all we need to do is actually copy that line and output it over here. So let's run it and see if we are successful. And yes, we are. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hello world. So just to show you that you might not run this loop even once, if I start my index as 5, and my condition is index less than 5, not equal, less than 5, which means 5 is not less than 5. Now I have nothing, because the body of this for loop never ran. So to do the same thing for a while, let me put this in a comment, that way we can compare it. So if I'll do while, and over here I will need to declare the index outside of the loop. So the initialization of the index and the increment, the initialization of the index will be outside of the loop, the incrementation will be inside the loop body. So as long as index is less than 5, we want to do this line, which is printing hello world, and then we'll do plus plus index. So once again, it will check is 0 less than 5, yes, it will print the hello world, increment that, and then it will do the first and the second, the third and the fourth iteration, and then when index is actually equal to 5, that's where the loop will stop. So let's run this. Once again, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hello world. So just as we did with the for loop, if I set it to 5, now we see no output of the hello world because the body never ran. So the last loop that we have is the do while. And as you remember, I said that in the do while, the do will run at least once. So once again, if we'll do index equal to 0, do, and it's nice that Visual Studio already with the snippet completed it for me. We'll say index less than 5, and over here we'll output this. And then we'll need to increment the index itself. So let's run this, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what will happen now if I'll change my index to 5? Remember, in the for loop and in the while loop over here, we had no output. But in the do while, we have 1. So even though the condition didn't meet, because 5 is not less than 5, and especially because we already incremented the index over here. But even if I say 4, right? No, we will keep it in 5 because 4 makes sense over here. It will also run. So 5, it will run this console write, increment the index to 6, and then 6 is not less than 5. So even though I set it up on 5 over here, just like in here, these loops were not running the body because the condition came first, and we check the condition. Over here we do the body of the do section, and then we're checking the condition. So just something to think of. So this is how for loops are actually working. So now we get into methods and functions. So like I said in the previous episode, main, for example, is a function. It's a function that accepting an array of strings that calls args, and those are basically the command line parameters that the user can send because it's a console application. So let's take this example of the printing and make it a little bit more changeable without changing too much code. So for example, if I said to you I want to output, instead of 5, I want to output 10, and instead of hello world, I want to output some other string, then you will need to go and change or find all the places that I'm outputting that string. But if I'll take this code and I'll write it as a function, so let's start writing it as a function. We first write the function itself. So we're first going outside of the main, that way we can write a function, and we'll declare the static. Static is just an access attribute, and it just means that it doesn't belong to any object. So even though it's under the class myMain, it's not, you don't need to instantiate the class to an object. I'll explain more in later episodes what exactly the static and all the attributes that can go on a method. The return type, what is the return type of a function? That's also important. For example, the main is returning nothing. But I can return any kind of object over here that I want. I can do object, I can do string array, for example. I can do strings. I can do the chars, all the primitives that we touched in the first episode, or the previous episode, sorry. You can return. And even complex objects like lists and stuff like that, you can return from a method. And we'll touch on that once again as we're getting more advanced in this. So we'll declare the function as static. That way main can actually see that, right? So the static can see static. And we will return nothing, which means that method doesn't expect, or the caller will not expect anything to come back from it. And we'll just call it, we give it a name, we call it myPrint. Now myPrint will accept an int, which will be the count, and we'll call it a string as output. Now we'll just be able to do a for loop, and we'll declare the index over here. We'll start it from 0, and then we'll say the index needs to be less than count, and then we'll increment the index itself. And what we'll do, we'll just write to the console the output itself. So that's very similar to what we did in the main function, right? We just created a for loop. We just, instead of count, we set to 5, and instead of output, we just said hello world. So if we'll come over here into our main, then we can say call myPrint, and you can see already that it gives me what is actually the expected parameters and the output. Before actually I do that, let's go over again on the remark over here, so I can say just that we'll be able to see how that's coming into play. So the summary of this function is output something to console. And then we'll say like count the number of times to output, and the output will be the output string. Okay, so now I define what each one of these, that by the param is what is the parameter over here, it gives it a name, and that's how it knows how to match them. The summary is the summary of the function. If I had a return type, it will have another line that says the return, and then you can say what is the return. So if now I'll call my function, I'll say my print. So now you can see that we output something to console. That's exactly what we wrote in the summary. And now it says to me that the first parameter, count, is count the number of times to output. It's exactly what we put it over here. So we'll say 5. Then we put a comma, it moves to output itself. Then it says the output string. So you can see how the remark can actually help you and help others to write or call your functions with better understanding. So the output will be hello YouTube. So let's run this, and now if we wrote it correctly, we should see 5 lines of hello YouTube. And there you go. Hello YouTube. So that's it for today, guys. I know I covered a lot, so feel free to ask me any questions you have. If something was not clear, please let me know and I'll clarify that. But we touched today on the type of, just clarifying the type of logics that you can put within an if statement or even a while loop or any loop itself that has a condition. I showed you how to write comments and the type of comments, and we looked on loops that have the 4 types: the for loop, the while loop, the do while, and then the for each, which needs an iterator. And then we looked into how to create a function and just went through real quick on a function itself that has the qualifier, the return value or return type, the name of it, and then the parameters that you want to list, and then the body of it. So like I said, if you have any questions or remarks, please leave me a comment down below. If you like it, please click the thumbs up. It helps me to know that you guys like what I do. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you can get notifications on next episodes. All right, guys. Thanks.